There's a lot happening in today's gospel, so let's start with some basics. We're in Jerusalem around the year 30 AD. It's the start of Passover, the most important of the 3 Jewish pilgrimage feasts. During Passover, the usual population of Jerusalem, about 40,000, would have quadrupled. So the streets are teeming with pilgrims and seekers and bystanders, all gathered to celebrate the feast of their liberation from slavery under Pharaoh, and also yearning for a Messiah to deliver them from their Roman occupiers at that time. There's tension in the air, excitement, chaos, restlessness. In their book, The Last Week, Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan paint a picture of 2 simultaneous processions taking place at opposite sides of the city. The first, from the west, the imperial procession of Pontius Pilate, led by troops marching in formation or on horseback, entering on a wide, paved Roman road. No doubt an impressive display of weapons and pageantry. It's customary for the Roman governors of Judea, who normally resided outside the city on the coast, to visit Jerusalem during the festivals, not out of religious devotion, but as a deterrent to any civil unrest that might occur with the influx of visitors. Pilate is there to maintain order, a reminder of the power of the Roman Empire. On the other side of the city, a different sort of procession unfolds. Approaching from the east, a counter-demonstration. Jesus, a teacher and healer from a small town in Galilee, makes his way into the city down the Mount of Olives. He's riding a donkey, the working animal of the poor. Actually, Matthew tells us that Jesus is riding 2 animals, a donkey and a colt. You sort of wonder how that worked. Were the animals side by side and Jesus was sitting on both of them? Or was he seated on one while the other walked alongside? It's an unusual image. The other Gospels talk about just one animal, a colt. But Matthew gives us this detail in order to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet Zechariah. Rejoice, O daughter Zion. Look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now, either Matthew misses the Hebrew parallelism in which the same thing is stated in 2 different ways, or he's going out of his way to show that this prophecy is, in fact, being fulfilled by Jesus beyond a shadow of a doubt. Though another explanation, and one that makes sense to me, is that it was customary for a colt that had not yet been ridden to be accompanied by its mother the first time it was used as a calming influence. In any case, it's not a very regal image. A peasant preacher on a donkey, or 2, probably doesn't look very competent or powerful. And yet, the crowds give him a royal welcome, spreading cloaks and branches on the road as he approached, and shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." Hosanna, it's an unusual word. In Psalm 118, it means save us or help us, and there's an element of urgency. Please, now. When we hear it in the Gospels 5 times, all with reference to Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, It takes on a sense of praise or adoration, recognizing Jesus as Messiah and Lord, the one who saves. So Hosanna can be a cry for help or a shout of praise, or maybe both. In direct contrast to the imperial procession, Jesus' entry into Jerusalem is a display of a very different kind of power. He rides a donkey instead of a war horse. No sign of armor or weapons in sight. It's an upside-down kind of power. The reign of God that he's always preaching about, where the poor and the humble are honored and blessed. We're told that those around him ask, "Who is this?" When I try to imagine what it might have been like to follow Jesus in that procession, I think of my friend John. John, who died a few years back, was a farmer, a musician, and a great shepherd of souls. John had Down syndrome. He was someone of great importance to me. In fact, he presented me for my ordination to the priesthood, albeit reluctantly. He didn't like church. And he didn't really care about formalities. He just cared about people. John had a few standard questions that he used to keep tabs on his friends. How are you? How's your mom doing? How's your car running? His words were simple, but he had a way of drawing you in. And when you opened your mouth to answer him, you'd find yourself asking, "No, really, how am I doing?" In his gentle way, he went right to the heart of things. No matter how hectic your day was, you always walked away from a conversation with John feeling just a little bit more grounded. John loved meeting new people, learning more about them, asking them their name and where they're from, and did they have a business card. John loved business cards. He liked to collect them as a reminder of the people he met. And he'd affirm people with a nod of his head and a few simple phrases. Oh, pretty good. I heard that. And in response to his simple offerings, people would just sort of open up to him. It was delightful to go around town with John and watch his artful way of engaging people. As he approached them, you could see them wondering, "Who is this?" And then you'd watch their expression shift from surprised to curious, to disarmed, to drawn in. One memorable exchange was with a burly officer at an airport security checkpoint who'd asked him to take his shoes off. John tilted his head and patted him on the shoulder and said, "So, do you have a business card?" For years, John and I and whoever else happened to be around had a standing Friday afternoon coffee date. And when we walked into our local Starbucks, we were treated like royalty. The baristas would greet him by name and start getting his decaf pour-over ready. Remember the time that he spotted someone new and struck up a conversation, asking her her name and what her job was. And she said, "I'm the president of Starbucks." Unfazed, he nodded and said, pretty good. They went on to have a delightful conversation, and later on she emailed me to say that meeting John was one of the most memorable encounters of her career. What was remarkable about John was how he received each and every person he met with great enthusiasm and honor, be it a car salesman, a politician, a bishop, or a trash collector. He met each one with a gentle knowing and he gathered us in and carried us in his heart. I remember a time when he was in hospital recovering from surgery. It was hard to get out of bed and get back on his feet. When the physiotherapist came to help him practice walking, he'd say, "Not today," or "I don't think so." So we had to get creative to come up with a good reason to get him on his feet. I said, "I wonder if there are any business cards down at the nursing station." So we set out into the hall, and he leaned on his walker and kept his head down, a procession of friends, encouragers, and physiotherapists around him. What I remember about that procession is that it wasn't the experts who got John walking. There was a beautiful, smiling woman named Maria who stood with her cart of cleaning supplies a few doors down from John's room. And she'd struck up a friendship with him each day when she'd come into his room to collect his laundry and tidy up. And when Maria called out to him, "John, come here, I want to talk to you," he stood up tall and looked at her and started to put one foot in front of the other and picked up steam. And as we made our rounds in the hospital hallways that day, and then again in the next days, I saw the same thing over and over. The people that John greeted were those who were invisible to everybody else. The man who polished the floors with his big sweeping machine, the woman who brought him his meal tray and then picked it up again when he was finished eating. It was all of these that John noticed and saw and heard and loved. This wake of wonder, this sense of being known and seen and heard, this is what I imagine it must have been like for Jesus' friends as they followed him in that procession that day, watching him unfazed by the adoration of the crowds, the still point in the chaos, grounded, humble, knowing, gazing into the crowd, seeing each person, sensing their need, hearing in their hosannas their cries for help and their sighs of praise, and holding them in his heart as he drew closer and closer to God. I wonder, where are we as we enter Holy Week? In the turmoil of our world, in the chaotic everyday of our lives, in the restlessness of our hearts, can we pause to be present to Jesus and to ask once again the question, who is this? We're invited here and now, today. Pilgrims, seekers, bystanders, to enter anew into the mystery of our faith, to break bread together, to stand in silence before the suffering of the world, to pour out our hearts in prayer, to cry, Hosanna, to whisper, Hosanna, to sing, Hosanna.